getting people where they live and in their heart, really rooting for these people is what Hollywood does well. And it was one of those things where everything kind of came together for me when I started writing, and I realized the extreme impact that we could have telling a diabetes story or telling a heart story.
Welcome to The Other 80. I'm Claudia Williams. Way back in 1994, I moved to DC from Indonesia with my husband, Dave. I was pregnant with our older son, Adam, and had just started my very first public health job in the U.S. It was a big transition. And we got together every Thursday night with our dear friends to watch ER over pizza and Starbucks ice cream. And since then, I have to say, medical dramas have been one of my healthcare touch points. And like 40 million other Americans, I've also been hooked on what is now the longest-running primetime medical drama in American television history, Grey's Anatomy. One of the people at the center of the show's success is executive producer Zoanne Clack. But Zoanne didn't come from Hollywood. She started as a physician. It took a lot of guts for Zoanne to leave her career as a doctor to try her luck in Hollywood. She arrived with no job and few connections, but she saw the power of story to create public health change. In this episode, Zoanne and I chat about the lessons she's learned from Shonda Rhimes about standing in power, what it takes to be a Hollywood showrunner, and her advice to Dr. Oz. Listen to what people actually say they need and want. So please welcome Dr. Zoanne Clack to The Other 80. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
And we are, just to situate for the audience, we are sitting in an amazing podcast studio at Aspen Ideas Health. Our guest, Zoanne, already got a head start on the morning with a hike up in the hills. So getting the full Aspen experience, and it's great to have you.
The thin air.
The thin air, exactly. Listen, you have a background in communications in college and then became a doctor. And an ER doctor, but also did work with the CDC.
Yes.
And then you went to Hollywood. And I'd love to hear you talk about the moment when you first had the inkling and then made the decision that storytelling was going to be your pathway to creating impact.
You know, it's funny how you just put that, because I've always felt like completely by accident, all of my truths and my pathway led to this point, which it all just came together with this whole entertainment education. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know I was on that pathway, but it really just spoke to me when I finally got into this entertainment world, and I realized that, you know, it was more than just some silly activity that I was going to go write for this TV show. On the one hand, you can save lives. On the other hand, you're writing for this, what seems silly TV show. But the impact and the gravitas that you can have just with that forum is so massive. So I'm African American, and in my culture and growing up, you know, my mom was like, doctor or lawyer, that is the path to success, and that's what you need to do. And around senior year of high school, I was like, wait a minute, I really like TV.
Interesting.
I'm the only child of a single mom who was in education. She was a high school teacher. So all her hopes and dreams mounted on my shoulders, and I was determined to fulfill them. And I was kind of raised by TV because she had 2 and 3 jobs, and I would do my homework and watch TV. So I just really loved TV, but it was never a job to me. You know, it was never like, this is something you can do and make a living and a career at it. This was something that people who already had a connection could do, you know? So I didn't really think about it, but I was going to Northwestern, an undecided degree, and they apparently have a very good radio, TV, film program. And people had strived their whole lives to be in it. But I was like, maybe I'll try that. So it took
I love sometimes when we're naive, it's like the best possible pathway.
Oh, my whole career is about being naive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it took me a year, and I got into the program. And that summer I went home, and my mom was like,
Because you were
Great.
talking about like how hard it was to get in and all the competition.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all she heard was
Not doctor.
not doctor.
So I changed my major to something that was still in the School of Speech Communication Studies, which was a beautiful foothold into doctoring. And then went to medical school. I thought I wanted to be a surgeon, put that to the side. Emergency medicine was great because you could still pursue other interests. Went into emergency medicine, started burning out probably in my second year of residency, and was like, what am I going to do next? And so I ended up doing a master's in public health. I did a fellowship in injury prevention there. And that was with Emory and the CDC right there. And so I got all those connections for the CDC. Joined the staff at Emory. Then I kind of went back. I started coming out to California a lot because I had some friends out there and kind of got the bug again. Like I wanted to do TV all those years ago. Maybe there's something in it for me. So I started looking around for things, and the show ER, I had actually grown up with it too because I was a resident in 94, the same year that Noah Wiley was a resident, an intern in ER. So basically my whole ER residency internship, we were all like,
we're doing it together.
Yeah. Until it got too much and we couldn't watch it anymore. So they were advertising in the back of the ASAP magazine, Annals of Emergency Medicine. And my friend sent me the thing about like they're looking for an on-set person for the show ER. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, I think this would be great for you. And so I wrote off a letter, heard nothing. And this is the crazy serendipitous part, is that one of my mentors, I randomly mentioned it to him, this opportunity. And he's like, oh, you should mention my name. I trained with the guy who's hiring on the show.
Crazy.
Because the guy, Joe Sachs, who was on ER already, had done a film degree and had done a residency in emergency medicine. So I wrote his name, another letter, immediately got an interview because Hollywood's all about who you know.
Yeah. Just like, it's like medicine and Hollywood connection game comes together,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. The one person,
right.
Who could have done that.
Right.
So I got the interview, didn't get hired, but I was giddy. I'd never been so giddy about a job,
One of my friends on LinkedIn, gosh, that's a funny thing to say, but recently said, go towards where you feel more alive. And I love that because it's not like every moment is perfect, but that aliveness, that feeling of this is where I'm meant to be. Wow.
I love that. Yeah, I totally did that.
If you went back to that feeling of giddiness, what was it about that opportunity that made you feel so alive?
And I didn't even realize the impact back then, but it was just the fusion of my two interests. The fact that I could still keep up all the stuff that I had learned. I would still be able to represent that part of my life, but also be able to participate in culture and like what's in your living room every day. And I had grown up with all of this stuff. It was so foreign to me, and to have a piece of it was very enticing.
I'm going to sit for a minute with Grey's Anatomy since that's the place we started. You spent many years starting as a writer and then as a co-executive producer on the show. I think many of us went through all of the seasons and variations and romances of the characters. But I'd love to have you take us kind of into the guts of how an episode was created, both from the standpoint of the actors and how that worked in the storyline, but also how you weaved a public health theme or a health theme into it and what research you did.
Yeah. The whole producing of one episode probably takes about 2 months for the 42 minutes that you see on screen. In the writing process, we come up with the ideas in the writer's room, and there's usually anywhere from like 8 to 12 people in the writer's room. Usually at the beginning of the season, we're just kind of like deciding, what is this season about? Where do we want our characters to go? What is our goals for this 22 episode season? And where do we want them to come out on the other side? Because every episode, is about a character learning and growing and doing something, moving them forward. Mm-hmm. So everything is character based. So the way we pick kind of the medicine and public health things is based on, will that get our character to their next goal, or what will they learn from this case? We're always scouring the journals and that sort of thing. We talk to experts. We try to get all of the information. And one of the things that, as the medical person, one of the things that I always asked an expert is like, if you had something that you really want the public to know, if you want an audience to get out of this story, what is that thing? Sometimes I can get it on.
Right.
Sometimes I can't, So, but it's just, what is that big message that you would like the public to know? We worked a lot with Hollywood Health and Society. They are a public health entity through USC Annenberg School of Journalism, I guess. They provide experts for free so that accuracy is not a problem. They're accessible. They get us in touch with experts, and they've already pre-vetted them to know that we can't give you money, but we can give you voice.
Yeah.
So, when you have a name like Grey's Anatomy and people know that you're going to be able to get to millions of people, we've oftentimes found the one guy who's done the one thing in the world and been able to talk to them specifically. And most of the time, those are academics. They're the ones that are doing the publishing of the journals and that sort of thing, the articles. But yeah, sometimes it's just issues. We'll have something, what's going on in the world right now, and we'll try to kind of go at it and in a character-based, drama-driven way, but just flesh out kind of what is the impact of the decisions that are being made in the world right now.
Yeah.
So we had the COVID season.
Yes.
We did a lot of women's reproductive health. Shonda, when she created the show, and she had people of color in positions of power, and that was groundbreaking, phenomenal. Everyone would talk about it. And she was like, I just portray the world as I see it, as a Black woman walking in the world. And that was enough back then. They were just people walking in the world, and people related to them on a level that was not race or culture. It was just, these people are successful and fun and beautiful and doing things that I want to do, and I want to know them, And as society has changed, we just evolved with it, and we're able to tell more stories from the perspective of what is it like living in the world as a person of color, and showing what those issues are, specific to that cultural experience.
Shonda has an incredible reputation for creating change and movements, and also cultivating what people call Shondaland, right?
Uh-huh.
Talk a little bit about that magic. What made her and the work she did and the movement she made so impactful?
I think it's just that she's incredibly talented, right? So you have to you can't deny the talent. And then on top of the talent, she is very specific as to what she wants to do. And she doesn't really yield. So if you want her talent, you need to follow her way of thinking, her rules, She would always make her ideas known, her stance known. And I think that having that backbone gave it weight, and they understood that with the creative came this other part. And I don't know. I think just learning from that, you just stand your ground a little bit, not like the gun laws, but but her standing the ground was really motivating for me, just kind of going through it and then becoming a showrunner myself. And then to just know that you have these ideas and to make them creative and make them stand out, but also still having impact, and still reaching people, and still being in their living rooms and pulling them in.
Yeah. I want to dig for a minute into the title showrunner. What is a showrunner?
I think of it as like the CEO.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So
I love it.
It's funny because especially people who grew up in entertainment, they were screenwriting degrees and they're writers now. And it's kind of like in TV, you have different levels, kind of like the Army or something. You go up from staff writer up to executive producer, and there's different levels. And somewhere along the way, sometimes you get tapped to be a showrunner, so kind of like the CEO. And suddenly you're running a business. Suddenly you're in charge of hiring and firing the entire crew. You have help, of course, people who know money. But, you're deciding the way that the show is going to go. You're deciding on money, budgetary kinds of things. We want to tell this story, but it's going to cost this much. So how do we tame that story so that we can still remain in the budget? Do we have to talk to the network about getting some overage costs? You have to know the 200-page budget and how everybody is figuring out.
That's a big switch from being a producer where it's more content focused.
Huge shift. And we're doing a lot more kind of training for it now. There's these showrunner training programs and stuff, but it's literally just being thrown into like this executive position. And this is only in TV, by the way. In TV, the writer is king, but in film, it's the director.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
in film, as the writer, you would never be in charge of all that. And the directors really don't either. That's more for
it's an
producers
executive producer,
and
right,
stuff like that.
Right.
But in TV, it all becomes
comes down to the showrunner.
writer. Yeah.
You know, I talk a lot with our students, and I think it can often feel overwhelming when one is starting out that you just have to say yes to everything. And I think that sense of how saying no sometimes creates more space. And it feels like it's going to create less space. So I think it feels like there's no space for that.
And I feel like maybe stand your ground would be more like stand in your power.
Yeah.
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 Know
And
what
to
your power
recognize,
is.
and in some ways, by doing that, you create that power. Like you are,
Yes.
it is there for you for the taking if you grab it.
Even when we were a fledgling show and we didn't have like a time to air and we were being pushed and the president of ABC was not loving the show and decided he was just going to put it on just to
Give
take
it a shot.
off, just to give it a shot, but not really. Like he was like, ugh. And even then, like even during that time, she was like standing in that power.
Yeah.
And then when we were a huge hit out of the box, she already had that, you know?
Yeah.
So she had it moving forward and they kind of knew who they were already dealing with and what the show was and how we were going to move forward. So, yeah.
Your expertise here at the conference is especially on how do we think about narrative and storytelling in a world where I think in public health, you know, we often say that the first step in solving something is admitting you have a problem, right? We always talk about that. And I think that first step for public health is admitting that they weren't doing awesome in communications. And one of the lessons coming out of COVID is just really needing and wanting to rethink that. But it's also hard because the field also feels under attack. And I'd love to have you talk about first, in a big picture sense, what do you see as some of the pitfalls and challenges of the way the public health field has been communicating? And then the next question will be, what can we learn from Hollywood?
Ooh. I mean, I think the pitfall is talking at people instead of talking with people, right? So just saying, this is a problem that you have and you need to deal with it.
Guess how motivating that is.
Yes. And like, we're going to put out all these ads and we're going to do all these things, but not really hitting them where they live. The thing that I think that Hollywood does very well is basically kind of with the Bandura theory, where you are relating to these people. You love these people that are in your living room, again, every week. So people can relate to these people and want to be these people or want to be these people's friends. So they want to do what these people are doing and want to know why they have these kinds of views. And we'll listen to these people when they speak about why they think this is the best way to go or the best kind of treatment or the best kind of policy. So I feel like getting people, again, where they live and in their heart and really rooting for these people is what Hollywood does well. Everything kind of came together for me when I started writing, and I realized the extreme impact that we could have, like telling a diabetes story or telling a heart story and all of these anecdotal stories of people who learned things from Grey's Anatomy and then took them to their doctors and were able to save their kids or save their own lives. Like we had an inflammatory breast cancer story where a woman had been kind of told, oh, you have a rash, and had been given all these different things. And finally, like went to her doctor and said, I feel like I have what this character had. Got tested. They found it early. And now she's still alive because, I mean, we'd like to say because she watched the show. And she'd like to say that too. And then there's all kinds of stories, very anecdotal, specific things that, you know, we give the information. We don't expect to be a documentary or to give you all the information. You obviously have to, if you're interested in the topic, go further. And we're not going to tell you all the details, but we're the stepping stone, you know, we can provide that, and we can just give not only information, but ideas to people who are not exposed to those ideas, like people who live in not complete isolation, but more isolation. They just don't know these kinds of people. And to have them in their living rooms, it feels like, oh, we're more exposed to different ideas than our neighbors or different kinds of social constructs and people than the people that we see every day. So I think just having that feeling of belonging, that feeling of these are my people and I am very interested in what they're doing and thinking is just a great way for the media in Hollywood to have impact.
Let's say you were talking to the California Department of Health director, and that person said, what do we need to take from that approach and apply right here where we are? What would you say?
Telling the stories. I mean, even when Hollywood Health and Society comes in, when they brief people to come talk to us, they're like, please don't give them a bunch of facts. You know, like you can have the facts. I
saw that one coming.
You can have the facts, but tell some stories. I love the facts,
Yeah. Give it to me.
I need to get those. Give me those.
Yeah.
But the story, telling the story on top of it really gets the writers and their juices start flowing. And then we can pull the little facts into the story. And the merging of those two is the thing I think that really gets people's heartstrings moving, you know? And so it's really about, if we're talking about the impact of this, is the storytelling and more the storytelling and less the ground cold facts, you know?
If you were talking to an MPH student and gave them that advice, how would you suggest they train in understanding how to tell a good story?
Well, it's just like not talking at people. It's, again, meeting them where they are and to not preach to people. You know, you're coming at it from a circular way. You're not going straight at the facts. What is a way you can tell that story more abstract? It's all metaphors in Grey's Anatomy. I mean, they're real obvious metaphors sometimes because we have the voiceover on the show. So the voiceover is kind of telling our theme for that episode. And if you look closely, all of the stories will fall in line with that theme. And so we're telling stories about that theme, but underlying it, the way they're getting to their goals or their learning is through the facts, the cases, the experiences with the patients. All of those things are factoring into how we get to the end goal. And it's all very abstract in metaphors and saying what we're saying without saying it.
It made me think of Joseph Campbell and myths and mythology and things like that, and
all
kind of the hero's journey and because it's an emotional arc also of that character, which sometimes I think in public health we're like, maybe I could figure out how to tell a story, but I'm not sure I know how to tap into emotions while doing it.
And that's the thing, really. Yeah. It's the tapping into the emotions. Yeah. It's the theory meeting the emotion.
Yeah. So we have as the head of Medicare and Medicaid, Dr. Oz, who I would say is our health policy maker from Hollywood. I'm curious what you think the potential benefits and the potential risks might be of him in that role.
I think it would be important to just not be in it for himself and really just listen to what's being said out there and what people actually need and want, as opposed to what we think they need and want.
That's a very useful message, I think, at this point. And I think that applies. I think there's been a lot of people. There's somebody who's here, Natalie Davis, who runs United States of Care, and they've been really thinking about what does it look like to make policy based on listening, and in an iterative way where you're really truly going out to folks. It's not just like a single focus group, but really testing policy ideas once they're developed and things like that. Okay, what would a Grey's Anatomy or ER or House or Station 19 look like for public health?
I just really love the idea of something based on the social determinants of health.
Yes.
You know, it's all the stuff that made itself very clear during COVID. It's that, you know, we all have the same disease, but it's affecting us differently and why. And to getting to that. And the fact that that's now a part of the culture and people understand that, I think that there's room for a show that could get into that and kind of see how the inequities are presenting themselves and how there's a chance to heal in not only just a preventive manner, but also just being able to go out and have more community-focused, community-based medicine
If you need help developing it.
I am in the midst of trying to do it.
Oh my God.
And working on a pitch right now.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
And it has to have all the Hollywood
of course.
glitz
Good characters.
and saving lives.
Yeah. I have some people you can talk to.
Community.
Right.
Community
I
stuff.
love it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of young folks and older folks at the School of Public Health that are really, they've been told that the future is going to work for a public health department, maybe going to federal policy. But I think they're craving perspectives on careers they could take that may not be in those traditional lines. And I think you yourself took a pathway that was not, was pretty unique. And I'd love your thoughts both on what advice you'd give to a person about finding that unique path, the path of aliveness. And secondly, if people are specifically interested in the intersection of health and media or health and Hollywood, how should they go about thinking about their careers?
Oh, yeah. That's so fun. I love the finding your, what was it? The finding your
aliveness.
Your aliveness. I would say definitely go into the light. Don't be afraid to take the chance. What I'm always telling my kids, failure is learning. So don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to take a chance when everyone around you is saying that is a fool's journey. You know, the thing we didn't get to is that, again, my naivety is part of how I got into this. I had moved to California, and
which itself was quite bold.
Yeah. I really don't understand. I don't even know who that person was. I look back and I go, what was I must have been very unhappy with what I was doing, because I just kind of as I moved, and then I started taking a bunch of acting classes, because as a girl from Houston, pretty much all I knew was there's these actors. And then I had this epiphany, we were doing this scene, and as an actor, you were supposed to access your crying and all of that through all of the hate, the pain, and everything that's happened through the years. You're supposed to dredge it up through your gut and pull it out through your eyes, right? And I always thought, they just put drops in their eyes. But no, you were going through this process. And meanwhile, I'm in medicine where they're like, push it down, move forward, go. And so I had all of this stuff that was just coming up through these acting classes. And I started writing it down because it was just all, coming up. And I was like, oh, this is what I wanted to do. I've always wanted to write, always. And I just kind of shoved that because I didn't think it was a career that you could be successful or, maintain your life. So I took some classes and I wrote my first script, and I, revised it maybe once. And that's when they kept me in mind. There was one of the executive producers from ER that was doing a new show, and she didn't know what she would need, but the guy from ER was like, why don't you just interview Zoanne? She seemed great. We didn't hire her, but she seemed great. So I went over and I was like, look, I'll do anything. I will be an on-set person. I will be an advisor for phone, but I'd really love to write. And I literally shoved the first script I'd ever written into her hands. Which, in
and then afterwards you're like, what?
Well, no. 10 years later, I was like, oh, that was crazy.
But if you hadn't done that.
Yeah. And she hired me as a writer. And that was my start. From there, it was Grey's Anatomy right after that. So I was too naive to be afraid at that time. And I think most of the time when everything is crazy and everything is oh my God, we've got these deadlines and this budget and this is not working and blah, blah. I'm usually the very calm one in the room and being like, guys, no one is dying. I have been in situations where literally the decision I make makes or breaks the lifestyle of a family, we can probably be a little behind, Right. So I think that attitude is what has gotten me through 22 seasons of being on Grey's Anatomy and in the Shonda Land world, actually. That kind of energy is a little bit different than the people who have been into entertainment the entire time. So yeah, it's really about taking that chance and finding what makes you sparkle. And
by the way, she's very sparkly as a person. I'm gonna.
It's the sweat.
It's the sweat. Okay, didn't have to share. In my show notes, I'd love to feature 1 or 2 episodes that you would love everyone to go back and rewatch. Oh. Which ones would you highlight?
There's a few I really loved. And I'm going to go on ones that I wrote.
Please.
There's one in the COVID one in season 17 was about the struggle that my mom went through when she got COVID, and it was from a care facility. And in the show, it's about Bailey's mom, and Bailey's mom ended up dying. My mom didn't die from COVID, but it was very personal, and I was able to put that on screen, and it was very cathartic, I think, for just generally the world, because we were all going through it at the time. And I always think of that season as kind of a time capsule for like people who weren't there, or people forget like how it was for the healthcare workers back then, and for just the people who were going through it. It was such an isolating time that people weren't talking to each other about what was happening. So I had this one whole act of just these two Black women talking to each other about growing up as smart Black women, which I was like, oh my God, I get to do this.
Oh, wow. I'll go back.
In season 6, episode 15, I got to talk about Richard, who was the chief of surgery. And he's one of our older characters. I did kind of a flashback episode when he was a resident, and he was the only Black surgeon in his residency. And Ellis Gray, which is Meredith's mom, was the only woman.
I remember this episode,
it was about when the AIDS epidemic had started. And I got to do a deep dive into like how that started and all of it was, it's very, I'm basically saying the same thing, COVID and the AIDS epidemic. But as a public health person and a researcher, that was such a gift to be able to kind of go back and relive that history and all the stigma and all of the togetherness that we could find from that stigma, to pull that out. And then we got to do some other fun stuff in that episode. So those are 2.
Those are great. I'm going to rewatch them first, and then I will post them. I think I'm also hearing the thread of storytelling as hope and as resilience and as feeling like you belong to a story, but the story was not written without you.
I think there's some future in that, perhaps.
Well, so wonderful to have you on, and have a wonderful rest of your day. You're making me want to go hike instead of sit here even though I want a podcast.
Hey, no, you're going to get lots of good stuff.
And thank you again for the work you do and for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
In her move to Hollywood, Zoanne Clack made a big bet that storytelling could help drive the change we want to see in the world. Storytelling is not always the starting place in public health, where we often start with facts. We want to know what the biggest challenges are, and then identify the evidence-based way to solve them. And for sure, that rigor is important. We don't ever want to risk losing it. But we can't forget that stories, not facts, move the world. This podcast was created by me, Claudia Williams. My podcast producer is Avery Moore-Kloss. Check out the show notes for more information on Zoanne Clack. There is more information on my background, this podcast, and our guests on our website, www.theother80.com. Until next time, I'm Claudia Williams.